The revolution's begun. The time to stand up has come. We are the rocking of the throne. We are the rocking of the throne.
Hi, my name is Victor Tiffany. I'm the co-founder of Revolt Against Plutocracy. Today I'm actually in revolt against ethical, misguided people. And it surrounds the whole issue of truth, honesty, dishonesty, and its role in politics. So before I go into the details of the latter, I want to talk about the truth. Part one, this is part one of a two-part video, and in this section I want to talk about truth and the difficulties and problematics of just understanding what truth is. I've been in this discussion with various interviewers and groups now for a week or two, and it's become evident to me that people don't really understand what truth is, much less how people should handle the truth and treat the truth. Truth is really a function of honesty. I'm going to come back to this, but it comes down to, no matter what the version of the truth is, when somebody's being honest, they're being truthful, and if they're being dishonest, they're being untruthful. So it's really the nub of the whole difference between truth and non-truth is honesty versus dishonesty. So what is truth exactly? Truth is not the reality that's out there. In here is our mental worlds. What's out there is reality, the non-mental reality. That's not truth, that's reality. Truth is something that begins in the confines of our skull. It's a human mental construction. What's in our skulls, our understanding of this reality, is a distortion of the reality, because none of us are omniscient. Nobody knows everything, even though people sometimes think they are know-it-alls. Nobody can know everything. Nobody is omniscient. Nobody's been here since the beginning of time, so nobody can possibly know everything. Nobody's read every book in a huge library. So that's pretty simple to understand. What's this understanding we have in our heads about what's out there is a poor reflection, a distortion of what's out there, limited by our own ignorance, because everybody is ignorant of something. Nobody knows everything. This, what's inside here, is not the truth. It only becomes the truth when somebody tells a story, writes about it. The novelist isn't telling the truth. The novelist is writing fiction. Fiction isn't the truth. Fiction is a series of lies and works of the imagination that might tell a larger story about the truth of family life or the truth of society. But by and large, a novel is fiction. It's untruth. But most times, an essayist or somebody talking to somebody else it will be honest and is telling the truth. If they're honest, they're telling the truth, even though that story that they tell might not correspond with someone else's story. And that's the fourth part of the truth, right? The first part is reality. That's not the truth. The second part, what's in our mind, that's not the truth. How we convey honestly what's in our mind, that's the truth, but it's dynamic. Fourth part of this is somebody listening to what you're saying. Your version of the truth might say, if they're friends, if they're allies, they might say, yeah, I think there's something you don't understand about this particular story. I've heard that there's more to it. And so you do some research and you find out that you didn't have the whole story, and it changes your version of the truth. Right? So the truth is dynamic. It involves interactions with other people. It might involve interactions with texts, books that convey a broader story. But it's dynamic. It's this week's truth won't necessarily be next week's truth, and we can't know next week's truth because we're not prophets. But this week's truth certainly isn't necessarily the same as last week's truth or last year's truth, because we learn more. Like scientific theories that get replaced by better scientific theories, so does the truth get replaced by better versions of the truth. So truth changes over time. Whose version of the truth is it that you're listening to? Whose version of the truth is it that you believe? Well, someone reliable, someone you know to be honest. That's the truth we come to understand. We know when we're telling the truth, but we don't necessarily know if our version of the truth is as accurate as someone else's version of the truth. Maybe someone else has more information. So it's dynamic and it's interactive with other people. Truth then begins in the mind as an understanding we have. It varies over time as we get better information, and nobody knows the whole truth, not even the know-it-alls among us. Because we all have a different story we tell, truth is plural. And I realize this is going to be a little difficult for some people to understand. I've seen people say, there's only one version of the truth. No, there's only one reality. But that's not the truth. There are many versions of the truth. It's true if you think it's true and you honestly convey what you think. So this whole idea that somehow we can have a consensus around the truth. And let me just back up a little bit. I want to talk about a theorist of truth, Jürgen Habermas, wrote about a consensus of the truth. That, first of all, he understood that fact and value are radically homogeneous. Let that sink in for a second. What we determine the facts to be is radically entwined in with our values. So that conservatives will have different facts than liberals or progressives based on the same reality that's out there. Right? Because our minds, our values shape, I refer to it as tinting, coloring the facts. So that a conservative and a liberal looking at the exact same president's speech can come to different conclusions about the president's honesty, about the president's sincerity, because they have different values. They're both telling the truth. And I realize this is very uncomfortable. That truth is multiple. The truth is pluralistic and not monistic. For Habermas, he felt that in an ideal situation, debate and discussion, and eventually they would come a consensus as to what the truth is. And our argument is that there is no ideal situation. That we have, in reality, people have different versions of the truth when the subject matter is value-laden. Right? When values are concerned, like politics, for example, is a value-laden discipline. And in a value-laden discipline, you're going to have different versions of the truth. And then, of course, that truth changes over time. And it's a matter of perspective. Someone from one side of the planet might have a different perspective on something that happened somewhere on the planet than someone on the other side of the planet. Different perspectives lend themselves to different understandings and therefore different versions of the truth. Same reality. Multiple versions of the truth. As Bruce Cockburn wrote many years ago in a song, so many ways to understand, one for every woman, child, and man, been that way since the world began. And this is hard for some people to understand. Yes, there are multiple truths. And sometimes it's not easy to tell when someone's being honest. Usually it's impossible to tell when someone's being honest. How nice it would be if candidates for Congress would run around hooked up to lie detectors. Then we'd all know when they're being honest and when they're being dishonest if they can't outsmart the lie detector. But the fact of the matter is, that would be sort of an ideal situation, and ideal situations don't exist. We can't tell when a candidate's telling the truth because we don't know necessarily ourselves what the truth is, and if we do know what the truth is, it doesn't mean that candidate knows what the truth is. The candidate's version of what's coming out of his or her mouth would be the truth if he or she is being honest. So how are we to determine if a candidate is telling the truth or not? And that's the crux of this part of my argument. We can't. We can't for certain ascertain as to whether a candidate is lying to us or telling us the truth in many examples, whether it's their opinion or their policy opinion, or policy position. Maybe, as Hillary Clinton put it, they have a private policy position and a public policy position. How are we to know unless they announce it? And smart politicians, after her leaked Wall Street speeches, where this was revealed that she had this private and public policy positions, no candidate, no politician in the world is going to announce that. No politician is going to announce he or she is being dishonest, because the people are demanding honesty. And that's the subject matter of part 2 of this dialogue, this monologue about honesty and dishonesty in politics. It'll be a dialogue when you leave comments below. Thank you. This is part 2 of a very difficult argument that I am going to make. Part 1, I made it clear it's very difficult for us to understand exactly what the truth is, particularly the truth that is in someone else's mind, or begins in someone else's mind, truth that is expressed by somebody else, such as a candidate running for office. In this part 2, this section of my discussion, I'm going to answer the question, is truth, is honesty always the best policy? It begins with an ethical quandary that most of us will never ever be in. So imagine you have a child playing somewhere in the neighborhood, a neighbor's home, you know right where that child is. You're busy doing housework or something. A man comes to the door, a stranger, carrying an assault rifle, wants to know where your child is. Are you going to tell him? Why do you want to know where my child is? It's none of your business. Tell me where your child is. Are you going to tell that stranger the truth? Or are you going to protect your child? Obviously, this is a no-brainer. You're not going to tell this stranger with an assault rifle where your child is. That would be insane. That would be unethical. The right thing to do in that situation is to lie. In this ethical quandary, truth is not, or honesty is not always the best policy. Second quandary, which applies more to my subject matter that I'm addressing. Imagine a terrorist kidnaps 100 Americans. You don't know who they are. And he's got a demand on you. For some reason, he knows who you are, and he's got something for you. He's got it out for you, is what I'm trying to say. And he's got a demand. He will release these hostages that he has in a house or a building that's wired to explode if he pushes a button. If you don't, tell 3 white lies, stretch the truth 4 times, tell 5 little, tiny, small little lies, fibs, and 1 whopper. You do that, he'll release the hostages unharmed. But if you insist on telling the truth, he's going to blow the building up and kill all 100 people. What are you going to do? Lie and save their lives? Or insist on telling the truth because it's your integrity and let 100 people die? Most people readily understand you don't privilege truth over human lives. If you do that, you are fetishizing truth. You're turning it into something much, much more important than it is. And I know this is hard for some people to swallow, but it's just, ask any philosopher of ethics in this country. No philosopher of ethics is going to privilege telling the truth over saving human lives. It's not going to happen. This is why I'm confident in my argument. Now, the analog for that situation are people in the country that do not have health care, can't afford it, don't have it. They fall in the gap between Medicaid and health insurance that they have to pay for. They can't afford it, and they make too much to qualify for free health care under Obamacare, or they live in a state where they don't have that option. A lot of people can't afford health care. The terrorists are the insurance companies, healthcare insurance companies that want that money anyway. And it's not you who has to tell some lies, some fibs, maybe a whopper or two. It's the progressive candidates. Progressive candidates are the people who, among other things, support universal health care. So those are the ones who may have to be dishonest in order to win their election. So I'm presenting a dialectic pole. The thesis that most progressives totally support is that no candidate should lie just to get elected. They're sick of the lies, right? Don't worry about winning the election. Just tell the truth. That's the current thesis. And what I'm presenting is an antithesis to that thought. That no, that's the wrong way to think. That is immoral. That is the lesser of two bad options. That is, you don't want to let people die. You want these candidates to lie if they need to lie, to cover up an extremist opinion or unpopular opinion or policy position that they might have. Right? If they're a candidate who signed the contract for American Renewal, all those policy positions go right up the middle of what's called the Overton window. Overton is a theorist, or was a theorist before he passed away at a young age, who argued that candidates have to hold policy positions, and I would add opinions, that are popular, that are supported by a majority of Americans, and you go to the outside of that window, that range of acceptable positions, acceptable to the majority, that is to say too far to the left or too far to the right, you lose the election. You have to stay in that range. So if you have a policy position that is outside of that range, let's call it extremist, you can't tell the truth about that. If you do, you're going to lose the election. Best thing to do for the candidate is to say nothing. Just say nothing. Keep it on the down low that the candidate has an unpopular position. But if push comes to shove and the candidate is asked, then the candidate should just lie flat out about the unpopular opinion or policy position, with one caveat that I will cover at the end of this talk. So that's my antithesis to the thesis that that candidates should always tell the truth. That is just the wrong way to think about it. It is more ethical for a certain kind of progressive, that is someone who supports universal health care, it's more ethical for him or her to lie and get elected if that's what is required to hold a popular position. That is to say, to hold a position somewhere within the Overton window. Everybody lies. We all lie. That's the title of a book. Everybody lies. So some people argue, well, we have to hold candidates to a higher position than we have. Sure, we lie. We fib sometimes. I haven't lied in years, but yeah, of course I've lied. Everybody lies. That's the fact. But we have to hold politicians to a higher standard. And I need to repeat, that higher standard is for them to lie, so they can win their election and get health care for all. Remember, they're in a quandary. It's not just should they lie or tell the truth. In that case, of course, they should tell the truth. That's not the problem here. The problematic is they are in an ethical quandary. If they tell the truth about some unpopular policy position, they lose their election. One less vote for Medicare for all or any kind of universal health care coverage, and people end up suffering needlessly. They don't get the health care they need. Some people will die. In this case, dishonesty is the higher standard that we should hold them to. Insisting that progressives always tell the truth is basically tying one hand behind their back. Right? They have the First Amendment right to lie, to throw mud at their opponent. It is their right to lie. Why are we handicapping them? Just because we have the wrong side, the wrong position on an ethical dilemma. Lying happens to be endemic in representative democracy. These are contests, these popularity contests, are contests for power. And from the very beginning of this republic, candidates have lied to get elected. So it's time for people who think it's horrible for candidates to lie and get elected, need to just put on their big boy pants, or their stilettos, or in some cases both, and grow up. Lying is just part of the struggle for power in this country. And the upshot of that, I realize this is uncomfortable and news that you don't want to hear. But the upshot of this, no, we can't trust any politician. None. No matter how close they are to our values. We can't trust them. We have to hold their feet to the fire. We have to hold them accountable to what they actually said. Another problem for those who insist that candidates tell the truth, we are, according to many commentators, in an era that is called the post-truth era. It's almost impossible to figure out what's actually true and what's not true. Part because we don't know what the truth is, right? Truth is complicated from the part one of this monologue, but also with everyone lying and some people just going from their gut. You know, it's crazy to insist that candidates always tell the truth to get elected. It is tilting against windmills. It's crazy. Progressive candidates have enough going against them. They don't need to make things harder for themselves. Again, it's like tying a hand behind their back. And you might, if you're going to insist they tell the truth in all situations about their unpopular policy positions or opinions, you might as well hand them a white flag of surrender while you're at it. Because basically you're telling them, you think truth is more important than winning the election. And that's just the wrong view. Winning the election for a progressive should be privileged over somebody's version of what is true or what is honest. Sometimes honesty is not the right policy. And also recall, this isn't election eras of the past. We're now in a revolutionary period. Right? And think about revolutions past. We're not talking about assassinating people or gunning down policemen or blowing up buildings or any kind of violent revolutionary tactics. We're talking about some fibs, some lies. I just don't think it's very revolutionary if you're not willing to use all legal means. And lying is legal. And in this quandary that some progressives are in, it's also the right thing to do. In conclusion, there is a tension between these two theses and antithesis. There are so many progressives out there that just don't want to hear candidates lying. And yet, they should. They absolutely should lie. So the balance the candidate who must lie must hold is, you can't tell the truth about certain unpopular policy positions or opinions on one hand, and you can't get caught lying on the other hand. In fact, you can't tell your spouse, your lover, your best friend, your campaign manager. Nobody can know you are deceiving them, because that's basically going to cost the candidate the election. So it's not really a fine line, it's just a very careful tactic that needs to be deployed. Don't let your conscience bug you if a candidate has to lie to get elected. It's part of what's needed at this stage. Go ahead and tell that lie and get elected, and focus on raising enough money so you can fight that fight against the well-funded bankroll, Wall Street bankroll neoliberals and Republicans. Spend your time on the phone. Lie if you have to. Don't tell a whopper when a fib will do. And don't ever, ever tell anyone you're being dishonest in the slightest way, because it'll blow up your face. It'll backfire. The aim here is one aim: revolution. And we can't have a revolution if progressives don't get elected. And some progressives won't get elected if they tell the truth. And that's the harsh medicine for the 2018 midterms.
Revolt Against Plutocracy won't just be covering the news about the necessary revolution in the United States. Sometimes we'll be making the news. If you want to stay on top of the revolutionary actions and strategies of grassroots, genuine progressives, and our allies, please subscribe to our YouTube channel today.